Well, that went pretty poorly. Okay, I somehow deleted the intro that I filmed for this, so we're just doing this again now, so you get the information that I deleted. Last night I ran the Blackamoor Chase, which is a race in South Sheffield. It's run by Totley Athletics Club. It's £5 to enter. Okay, on with the bit that I didn't delete. It's a category BS race and has about 250-ish metres of ascent across the whole course and covers about 7.3 kilometres it worked out at in the end. The race did start at 7:30 in the evening, so it's a fairly late start, but most of the weekday races do have pretty late starts just to allow for people who work 9 to 5s. I'll just give a quick overview of how the race was organised and how the kind of logistical side of it was and everything, and then I'll talk about how my race went. So the organisation was pretty good. They did have parking available and marshals directing people into parking spaces. The parking area they had wasn't huge, and considering there were about 200 racers in the race, it was a bit of a squeeze. They were basically like Tetrising cars into the car park, which, you know, it worked, and I think they did get everybody in the end, but it's something that I think maybe it would be better to encourage people to try and car share more, because there isn't a lot of parking space in the area. Registration was dead simple. That was really quick. There was no kit checks or anything because the weather was basically really hot, so they didn't really require anybody to have any like wet weather gear on them for the race, and they did request that people have a rough idea of where they were going, so I guess to have at least studied a map, so that just in case there were any bits of the course that were like not properly flagged, or if there wasn't a marshal somewhere. But the course was really well marshalled, and there were flags at like junctions where there wasn't a marshal, so they did have flags telling you which way you needed to go. Not that it was much of a problem for me because I was not near the front so I was just following other people for most of the race. The course started at Totley Sports Pavilion at the playing fields there, did a lap of the playing fields, and then headed along Strawberry Lee Lane, which took us basically onto Blackamoor, and then we followed the tracks and trails kind of around Blackamoor, taking us up kind of in the direction of Burbage and Hounkirk, but kind of turning and coming back before we had to cross a road or anything. So there was no road crossings. There was a little bit of road running obviously at the beginning and the end, because we finished on the same bit of Strawberry Lee Lane as we started on, but there were no, I didn't see any cars when I was on the road, and I don't think it's a very busy road, so that wasn't really a problem. There was obviously a fair bit of uphill on the course, and there was some pretty intense downhill as well, a really long steep section of downhill actually that was kind of scary. So there was a lot of variety basically, and there were some sections where it was really runnable and did feel easy to run, but those sections were few and far between. The course was nice, organisation was pretty good. We did a mass start because there aren't any regulations saying that races have to do wave starts anymore, so it's sort of up to each club's discretion as to whether they do mass starts or wave starts now. But yeah, it was all pretty smooth, and I was happy with how everything was organised. Okay, on to how my race went. It was a pretty poor performance. There's not really any way of sugarcoating that. I have obviously had time to think and process why it was such a poor performance, and they are very obvious reasons, so there wasn't too much kind of introspection required there. It was really hot for me anyway. It was 26 degrees centigrade, which is not a temperature I'm used to running in, nor a temperature I enjoy running in, nor a temperature that I'm good at running in. So the heat was there and very present on the first kind of lot of uphill, which was probably about the first 3 and a bit kilometers of the race was uphill essentially, and it was hot. So although I'm normally stronger on the uphill, I was just really struggling with the heat, really struggling. The pollen was fairly high. I do have hay fever, so that does affect me, unfortunately. With races, I don't tend to really notice it until afterwards, and my chest like starts to rattle. But it was definitely a factor, I think. So heat and pollen, you know, whatever, they can happen anytime. You can't necessarily do a huge amount to control those factors. One thing that was just very apparent is my downhill running technique needs so much work. I'm very, very bad at downhill trail running. There was a really long, steep section that was kind of like loose, stony trail, I guess. And I was just so slow. I was just so slow on it. I got overtaken by so many people. I just didn't have I don't think the shoes really helped. I was wearing barefoot shoes and they didn't have any cushioning, and that was probably not ideal. Really should have thought about that. But anyway, I didn't, so I was slow. And I don't have the confidence, I think, to do downhill fast because it's just scary. It's very scary. But that is something I can work on. I can put downhill training, specific downhill training, into my general training routine, and I can get better at it. And I think even if I had a little bit of improvement on the downhill, it's going to make those kinds of sections on races just so much easier. So that is something I'm going to work on. I've got a handful of other races coming up this year. The main one is obviously my ultramarathon, but I've got a roughly 11 kilometre fell race in 2 or 3 weeks, and I have a moorland race a little bit after that, and then I have the Sheffield half marathon, but that I'm not really going to take that one too seriously because I'm just not interested in like road races generally anymore, I don't think. But I signed up for it ages ago. I might even pull out of it. I haven't really decided yet. So for the rest of the races this year, I'm just gonna use them, keep using them as learning experiences, and start to add in these things into my training to improve on my weak areas. And then next year, I think I'll be in a much better position to start being like actually competitive, because I will have had the races this year to kind of like highlight what I need to do better and to start putting that into my training. Yeah, lots to work on. I just feel that distances under 10 kilometers aren't really where I'm gonna be able to shine, because endurance is my strength. So once we get 10 kilometers and above is where I start to really, I think, get a bit better, and where I start to really show my strengths. But I do think having these shorter races just in every so often is useful, just to see kind of where my speed is at, how fast can I go, and it just spices things up a little bit, throws in a little bit of variation, which I don't think is ever a bad thing. Change of scenery. Greg needs the living room because that's where his work office is at the minute, and he needs to start work. Lots learned over these first 4 races this year, and yeah, I've got the Salt Cellar Fell race coming up, and I'm going to do the Bleaklow Blitz, which is a new race. That's in a little while, and I really haven't decided whether I'm going to do the Sheffield half marathon, but I'll see how things are. I can always just pull out at that last minute, I think, if I really don't feel like it's going to be a good idea to do, because it's now, because of it being rescheduled like 3 times, it's now really close to the ultramarathon. Obviously I don't want to do anything that's going to jeopardise the ultramarathon too much, but I feel like I could still just do a kind of steady performance at the half marathon and be okay for the ultra. Personally, I think that would be doable, but I'll see how I feel nearer the time. So I've got a few more experiences this year to get under my belt, get that race experience, and really like nail down what my weaknesses are, and then I think in the autumn I can really start to put more effort into specifying training those weak areas. I'll do a bit before then, obviously. I will start putting downhill training in specifically, but it's not something I'm going to worry about too much until after the ultra. There isn't a ton of elevation gain and loss in the ultra that I'm doing in October, so it's not something I'm going to worry about too much until afterwards. Anyway, thank you for listening. I hope that was a useful little breakdown of the Blackamoor Chase, and if, I don't know, if you're someone who's struggling with race performances at the minute, then I don't know, maybe my ramblings were helpful in some way. But thank you for watching. Feel free to check back at other content on the channel to see what kind of stuff goes on here, and I will catch you next time.